Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar in the news part 3. My name is Sierra Martinez, and I'm Logarithm's Digital Marketing Specialist. I'm going to pass things over to your speakers today, Jake Haldeman and Mike Villavicencio, in just a minute, but first I have a few housekeeping items I want to run through. So there are a couple of things for you to keep in mind throughout. Everyone is muted to ensure audio quality. And with that said, we're here to answer any questions you have. So if there's anything you'd like to ask our panelists related to today's topic, please feel free to send questions through the chat feature at any time. We built in time specifically at the end for Q&A, so stay part of that for the presentation. It'll estimate about 30 minutes to an hour of content for you, so stay tuned for the whole thing to get the most out of your session, as well as complete all of our polls to receive free exclusive content. Now, our agenda today is pretty straightforward. We're going to turn it over to Logarithm Channel sales engineers who will dive into a couple recent security news topics, which they will reveal in just a few moments. Our speakers will share insights and take your most pressing questions at the end. So now I'll pass it over to your speakers.
Woo!
Hey, part 3. You guys actually stuck around for a third one and pulled through the cringiness of our presentation.
No, they're back for more, Mike.
Yes.
They had so much fun, they want more. That's why we're here. Guys, welcome to our webinar today. Just to kind of kick things off, my name is Jake Haldeman, a channel sales engineer here at Logarithm. Interesting fact about me is I've worked at Logarithm for about 6 years now. Mike, what about you? You want to introduce yourself?
I would like to. Yes, thank you. My name is Mike Villavicencio. People just call me Mike V. It's a long last name. I actually just celebrated my 2 years here at Logarithm back on the 22nd. So, yeah, great to be here. Recently transitioned over to the channel. I've recently worked in the field supporting New England. But let's go and continue the show.
Yeah, Mike. So this week, or this webinar, we have a couple topics that we're going to be talking about. So the first thing we're going to talk about is good deeds to unlock ransomware. And then related to that, Tenable has done some research about a do-it-yourself ransomware kit. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how that applies to all of us. And then an interesting article about the PyPi Phython packages that are malicious. They've been identified as stealing AWS credentials and then pushing it to an unsecured site too. And then also just some other kind of security vulnerabilities around OpenSSL. So let's jump right into this, Mike. You ready for this?
Let's do it.
All right. So, Mike, this was your article that you found. So why don't you kind of give us an introduction, talk us through this a little bit.
Yeah, so before I get into it, it's basically as it sounds, right? It's saying if you've been hit with ransomware, but instead of expecting to pay a ransom with cash or Bitcoin or some sort of bank account, no, they're expecting you to do physical labor or, in this case, good deeds. With that, I'll start it off and I'll get into it because it just blew me away when I first saw it. I was like, yeah, that's definitely going into the next episode. So it's a new ransomware called Goodwill. Its drive is to steer away from those standard attacks and responses to it, and instead this forces the victim to perform good deeds in order to get the decryption key. This ransomware was discovered by threat analysis firm CloudSec. I did provide the link in the article or in the slides here, which identifies it as global malware. So this is actually traced back to India, which they did a little bit more sleuthing and found that out. The security bulletin notes it will encrypt photos, documents, and other important files. The malware encrypts files with AES, and it also uses a 722.45 second sleep timer to interfere with the real-time analysis.
It's a very precise time, 722.45 seconds.
It really is. So there's the 3 steps involved here. Just there's a lot of questions. It generated a lot of questions when I read the article. So and definitely want to hear any feedback on that because I found it just crazy that they went to this extent. So the first stage of the file recovery involves giving clothes and blankets to the people on the side of the road. So the instructions note people can die without adequate clothing. So in order to satisfy the first requirement, the victim must take a video of the event. They then have to post it on an Instagram, Facebook, or WhatsApp story using a photo frame provided by the hackers. I know, I chuckled, but it's also like just wild, right? And then they must also encourage others to do likewise. And it doesn't really indicate exactly how to do that, but there's screenshots of what they say. Finally, they say have a screenshot of the story and email it to the group, their group in this case, in order to proceed to the next round. If they clear you, then you go on to the next phase. I'll try to be a little bit more speedy here because there's a lot to get through. But the next phase is about feeding hungry children. So the victim has to pick up 5 kids under the age of 13. Doesn't explain how you make that deduction or figure out their ages, but you have to take them to dinner. In this case, it's not just any restaurant. It's not like your Olive Garden or something like that. It's Domino's, KFC, or Pizza Hut, and explicitly calls out those. So it's not really clear why those, but I'm kind of guessing it's to be faster with the response and making sure that there's not too much of a breadcrumb trail, no pun intended. But in this case, it's not also stated whether you must accompany them to the nearest bathroom afterwards. They could just run off and you lost your chance to get that phase completed. But once they've devoured the food, is what it says, you have to take selfies documenting their happy faces, quote unquote. It's just another thing I just had to laugh about. This is too fun to pass up. Naturally, the selfies have to be made in a story for social media, so they must also email hackers a copy of the receipt and the requisite screenshots. The third and final task is probably the most horrific, honestly. You must pay someone's hospital tab. So if you're in the United States, that's a complete gamble. Like, you could be talking about $2,000, maybe $130,000. It's really a minefield. So it also seems like this would be something that's impossible to figure out, but the instructions do say they should go to a hospital and start talking to people. Again, no direction on what to say to them and say a specific set of words or sentence. That's not really clear. Naturally, they must record the conversation. This chat will include the victim telling them that they don't need to worry anymore. So it sounds like as long as they paid a majority of the bill or the maximum part of the required amount, not really sure how that's dictated. But to finish the phase, they must send the hackers an audio recording. There's no requirement to submit proof of payment, though. So it's finally the last part, which is posted to social media again. And the post summarizes that the person's transformation into a good Samaritan, all thanks to malware. So just a whole different take on ransomware. Whether this is all actually happening, I have yet to see it in the wild. But they have screenshots of this stuff in the article. And once the conditions are met, the victim receives a decryption kit, and they should be able to recover their data. But remember, not all of the decryption keys work. They work about like 60 to 70% of the time. I'm not sure if you guys knew that.
All right, so Mike, I got to stop you. First off, incredible explanation. This is so shady, but it's also interesting because they're obviously not out looking for money. They're trying to exploit environments that aren't taking proper security hygiene, right? And then they're just trying to make you feel bad and guilt you into doing better, which is really interesting. Because rather than saying, "Hey, you have to give us $1 million to get your data back," they're saying, "Go do good deeds." That's so interesting. It's very, very big shift from what we see today, but it's still ransomware. It's still, it still has those negative connotations because it is ransomware.
And I would go as far as saying it's unorthodox, right? It's a very unorthodox approach because the standard's always like, well, here's your Bitcoin wallet they have to submit it to, or here's where you should send it over to. Yeah, it just strays far away, and it sounds like, hey, so maybe this is a good thing that happens in the wild. I'm not sure, but for the most part, it could take a long time to do all 3 of these steps. I'll just finish it off with the next part of the article or some supplemental information about this. I'm not sure if we have a slide on this one, but this came from CloudSec, and it's able to trace the origins back to India, and it was discovered that the IP address had some language used in some of the code as well. So though Goodwill is different in nature than other ransomware attacks, mitigation efforts are the same. So you can always contact the authorities, work on your backups. Always have backups, by the way, if you don't have them. Make sure you have the rule of 3. You have a hard copy, you have a backup copy, and maybe a physical copy of whatever you're trying to back up. But
it's stored in multiple locations, yeah.
Right. So, and then the next article, as a supplemental part, is hackers have found that subscriptions are more lucrative. So they've shifted away from older models. Now we have ransomware as a service, and that business has skyrocketed in the black market. So in 2020 alone, ransomware groups reported and earned $692 million from collective efforts. and 380% increase over the previous 6 years combined. Now, from 2013 to 2019, that was only $144 million made in that time frame. But in 2020, it was absolutely insane. And I like to always say that thanks to the pandemic, this was just another thing that hackers took advantage of. It's really, really unfortunate, but it did happen, and they're very successful in those attacks.
Yeah.
And then, go ahead.
I was just going to agree with you. You know, a lot of organizations skipped a lot of security to speed up the work from home capabilities. And this is kind of the fallout from it, right? You can see that there's a huge increase in ransomware attacks because of those overlaps in security.
Yeah, absolutely. Wireless networks are not as well maintained at home, whereas enterprise probably more so. That's for a different conversation, but that can also be contested. But the last portion I wanted to call out was that affiliates that earn 70 to 90% of the lion's share of the ransomware payment are charged with the task of doing the dirty work. So they're the ones who are actually spear phishing or using tried and true methods like deploying brute force attacks or on remote desktop protocol, RDP. And then exploiting unpatched or zero-day vulnerabilities, and then purchasing stolen credentials from the dark web. So these people or these hackers are also work with initial access brokers, or IABs, which individuals or groups that already have gained access to the networks are selling those to the highest bidder. And then their fees range from, on the average, between $303 for control panel access to as much as almost $10,000 for RDP access. It's just wild stuff, but the good news is these mitigation efforts are very much the same. Again, backups, different locations, virtual copies. If you have an image, all the better. But with that, I will go ahead and continue on with Jake's section. I think you got some stuff on PyPi. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say it's interesting. Laspis. I always say that group wrong, but I remember them advertising basically like a job posting saying, "Hey, we'll pay you for access to your company's environment," and then to see these numbers that people will pay $10,000 for RDP access to environments. That's alarming. Disgruntled employees could easily be swayed by that. Kind of like what you mentioned earlier, healthcare costs, especially in the United States, can be ridiculous, and quick, easy money like that could be very tempting. So I think it's important to remember that even though you say, hey, we're patching our servers, we have good security posture, a lot of times it's that end user that could be the weakest link in that chain. So insider threat detection, things like that would be really important here. All right, Mike, I'm going to go keep moving since you wanted to talk about PyPi. I thought this was really interesting. There's obviously a ton of software developers in this world, and I'll admit not all of them are creating content from the scratch. A lot of people say, why reinvent the wheel? And libraries such as PyPi are out there. Obviously, this is a library tied directly to a Raspberry Pi, but I've noticed that Raspberry Pis are becoming more and more common in the enterprise environment. Digital signage, check-in boxes, a lot of just those little basic IoT devices are powered by Raspberry Pis nowadays. It's become very popular. And so when I saw this article, I thought it was kind of very alarming, because what they're saying is that there was a group that published some rogue modules that look like common modules. So, the average developer or a beginner developer might not notice the difference, and they're using a compromised package. And it was published on the PyPi repository, so you could quickly install it and get going. But because of this, it was able to then detect AWS keys and transmit that to an unsecured website that you could then access all the stored keys. It was actually posting it and storing it as a .txt file on this compromised system. Now, I'll give a huge shout out to the organization that caught this. Sorry, I just have to pull up their name. Sonatype. They have some software apparently that's helping to detect this type of activity. But it basically, they found some very common commonly named modules, not really common modules, but one was called loglib module, another one was called PYG module, and these were named to target some specific groups. Really, the PYG module is tied to neural network and deep learning capabilities. And so, honestly, as I read this, I interpreted this as they're targeting organizations like education that have heavy AWS workloads where they might not notice a rogue actor getting in there, having access, and running crypto miners or malicious websites or whatever with these AWS keys that they're stealing. Obviously, that's not going to be the limited of that scope, but just neural networks, deep learning, that's going to be tied to something that's not just an everyday developer need. But then, it was really interesting because what they're doing is these compromised modules were just using built-in AWS metadata technology. When you spin up an EC2 server, virtual server in AWS, they actually have a URL you can call to get metadata about your instance. And included in that are IAM credentials. And so now all of a sudden they're getting access to the credentials to provision new servers, access S3 buckets, things like that, just through this exploited metadata field within the AWS ecosystem.
And from what I read in there, Jake, it looks like they're just simply printing this to this text file and saying stuff like, here's the AWS credentials, here's the access key, they literally run the env command or environment run to look at what's actually running on that particular machine, and then they get the H keys. So it looks really simple. It's all readable. So it really blows away that they would have something just published like that on the server, and then someone could just easily find it.
Yeah, well, it's that like love-hate relationship in terms of security and convenience, because a lot of organizations leverage these exact same URLs and APIs that Amazon provides to automate and make it very streamlined process. But now it's being used as an exploit. And so it is definitely one of those things that we need to consider and make sure that there's some awareness on. The other thing that I found interesting is, as I was reading about this, my first thought was, well, how would we detect and monitor and stop this? And it comes down to the side that you need NDR type solutions. You need to be able to be aware of what's going on through your network, regardless if it's AWS in the cloud or on-prem or any cloud provider. You still need to be aware. I'll admit in this specific scenario, it'd be kind of tricky because you're watching for basically a call to AWS. It's just calling another web service to push that out. But and that's exactly what Sonatype was doing. Is they said, hey, why are these rogue URL calls being made? And they're able to reverse engineer from there. So having an NDR solution in place would definitely help. I'm not saying it's like the silver bullet to solve all of this, but it would definitely be one of the key critical steps to be able to catch something like this. What do you think, Mike?
I was just going to mention that, that is a good call out for an NDR solution in place, or a network detection and response remediation solution in there to look at that metadata, look inside the payloads, and understand just exactly who's talking to who. So having something like that, having something to contextualize information about a host, or in this case, start to build baselines around user or host activity on the network side, really does allow you to see, okay, should this actually be going to this direction? Is my north and south traffic intact, or is it looking okay? That's critical stuff. So I think that's how you would kind of start to go down this trail of tracking this stuff down.
Yeah, and like I said, Raspberry Pis, they're growing in popularity. And obviously, Raspberry Pi is a physical device, so that would be on-prem most likely where this is happening. But most likely those Raspberry Pis are talking to AWS already. Again, like a digital signage, it's probably pulling images or content from the AWS databases and storage buckets to display on the screen. And so those API keys are there and being transmitted in plain text over your network. So being able to detect and respond to that is critical. I just want to tie in something a little bit less related, but kind of interesting. One of my logic approaches of saying, well, Raspberry Pis are growing in popularity, and especially in enterprises and unique locations, is how there's actually recently a group of Utah State University students that built a Raspberry Pi Zero satellite. And so they actually shipped this thing up into space, and it performed 117 days in space, completely powered by Raspberry Pi and Python, which, again, that's the whole stack that was just compromised. And so I imagine the satellite itself might not be pushing directly to AWS. Maybe it was. But I have a feeling that, something like this could have been at risk if they're using those specific libraries. And so what I'm kind of transitioning to is it's important as we develop software to be aware of where we're getting these, what repositories we're pulling from and how trustworthy they are. And to kind of keep the story going, I'm going to shift over to this other article about OpenSSL remote memory corruption. Mike, I think you saw this article, right? Basically what happened is June 21st, so about a week ago, OpenSSL version 3.0.4 was released. And it ends up that it's susceptible to a remote memory corruption, which could be easily triggered by an attacker. And so, the article actually initially says this is compared to Heartbleed in terms of severity. But the thing that I found interesting is we keep reading, it starts to degrade this severity a little bit. They pointed out Heartbleed was unpatched and exploitable for many years. This is something that came out almost a week ago. Additionally, this branch, the OpenSSL version 3 branch, isn't very popular. The most popular one is still the 1.1.1 branch, which is not tied to this vulnerability. And then also it requires a CPU that can handle an AVX512 capable processor, instructions. And I actually looked it up, and all of a sudden we went from thousands of processors to like 6 that are actually vulnerable to this. And so I thought it was actually really funny that the article is like, we're comparing this to Heartbleed. And then as we go through, it's like, yeah, but we have this and we have this and we have this. And so a lot of reasons why it's not quite as alarming as the article makes it sound to. The other thing I thought was interesting is that there's a Google engineer that's tied to the Boring SSL and the Chromium project. He reviewed this and he's like, yeah, you're right. It's a security flaw for such a small audience that I don't consider this a real risk. He called it a non-security risk. Moral of my story here is that as organizations work hard to maintain software, produce quality software, third-party components is really critical. You need to make sure that you're doing code scanning. Just because it's a very popular component, it doesn't mean that you should be able to natively trust it. You need to do your own due diligence. And honestly, I wanted to tie this a little bit to Logarithm in our process. We have a CI/CD pipeline process where, as code's checked in, it's regularly scanned, checked for errors, checked for security vulnerabilities. And in addition to that, we also do regular penetration testing and security analysis of the software. And I think all organizations should be expected to do this. If you're developing software internally, you can't just assume that whatever's been published or made available on the internet is trustworthy. You got to invest in it and make sure that what you're doing is something that you can rely on and put your faith in. And with that, I'll mention Logarithm has worked really hard in the last few years to update a lot of our third-party components. Make sure that when you're using the Logarithm SIM or Netmon or Logarithm NDR, that you can trust those components, that they're secure and not going to put you at risk. So I think it's a really interesting area. It's that DevSecOps merger. And being able to be aware and also be able to say, hey, we just learned about this vulnerability. Are we impacted? Be able to answer that question quickly. It's another huge aspect there. Mike, do you have any thoughts? Sorry.
Yeah, you called me just as I was going to mention it.
Right. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. And it was easy to overlook this stuff, right? It's underlying technology that we use in our everyday applications. So, for the admins out there, for the administrators who and sysadmins out there that maintain this stuff, that's just another layer of complexity that I have to be concerned about. When I worked over at AT&T at the NOC, That was just one of the things I didn't really care about. We would forego a lot of the security hygiene. And this is one of those things is, oh, is it patched? Like, I don't know. Do I care? No, I got 500 other things I got to worry about. But it's always crucial to be mindful of this stuff because, it's the difference between doing your everyday work to you losing your job or ending up in the newspaper. So this stuff is critical. Just keeping an eye on those very common applications and protocols that are used outside your organization and internally. That's the stuff. Just keep tabs on that. It's another thing to be worried about, but this is the stuff you got to worry about. In security world. Fortunately, it's not widespread. Not as much as Heartbleed is or was. But it's definitely a good call out, Jake.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Pretty interesting stuff today. Sierra, I think this is the main areas we wanted to cover. Do we want to open up some polls?
Yeah, okay. Let's go ahead and open up some polls. Remember, if you complete all 3 of the polls, then you'll receive free exclusive content after the webinar concludes. So I'll go ahead and launch these. Jake, Mike, if you just see any questions come through, go ahead and answer those. So everybody, if you do have any questions about anything that popped through, make sure to ask those. But in the meantime, as we wait for those to come through, I'll launch some polls for you guys.
Yeah, it's so as you fill out the polls, and if you have any questions, submit them. I'm going to be a little selfish and mention one of my favorite user conferences that happens every year. Now, maybe I'm biased. I've worked at Logarithm for a few years, but we have this small little user conference we hold in Denver each year. And obviously, the last couple of years, due to COVID, it's been virtual. But this year, it's back in person. Rhythm World 2022. It's going to be September 13th to the 15th here in Denver, Colorado. And we'd love to have you all come and join us out there. I know I've submitted a couple of talk presentations. I don't know if you did, Mike, but it's going to be a good time. We always make sure that the customers have a great experience, and you get to interact with other Logarithm users as well as Logarithm staff, experts, and partners, things like that. It's a really good time, and usually always includes some food, alcohol, and all the things that you'd want after a stressful long day. Yeah, Mike, have you been to Rhythm World before?
I've never been in person. So I mentioned at the beginning of the call, I've only been here 2 years. So I started during the pandemic, and that's fine. But I've been there virtually. I cannot wait to go there in person. We're going to have a lot of different partners there. Just like Jake mentioned, it's in Denver, Colorado. If you go to logarithm.com, and you'll see the banner at the top that calls it out. So you can register there. There is a early bird special going on right now. So if you do want to join us, feel free to sign up now. There is a hotel reservation there for you as well. So with that, we'll move on to Q&A.
Hey, Sierra, it looks like someone reported that they're not seeing the polls. Did we get all those squared away?
It should be. I'm seeing people answering the polls on their end. So it might be a pop-up blocker error on that end. But the poll right now is saying, are you interested in scheduling a Logarithm demo? And then there's one more coming up. The first one that just previewed was asking if you're interested in or if you're in the market for a SIM solution. So I'm going to be launching the third poll just right now. So let's see if everyone's able to see that as well.
All right. As we launch that third poll, I have to point out something I saw on LinkedIn this morning. Mike, I don't know if you spend any time on LinkedIn. It's kind of an addicting social media tool for me, but our Logarithm CEO, Chris O'Malley, he actually posted something today that I thought was interesting. He mentioned that July 5th, we're making a major announcement. Did you see this, Mike? Did you hear about this?
So I've been traveling, so I have not had a chance.
Well, he posted it this morning, so I don't know how long you've been traveling, but I know you've spent a couple of days in airports just hanging out. Yep. But yeah, basically, he's talking about in this post how July 5th, we're going to make an announcement about a litany of innovation deliverables focused on our mission to provide our precious customers the clearest and most precise insight into increasingly sophisticated cyber threats and empower their high-performing security teams to quickly reduce noise, secure their environment, focus on innovation, and safely win in the digital age. So I'm actually really excited for this. July 5th, so next Tuesday, right after the U.S. 4th of July holiday, Logarithm's making a major announcement. So I hope everyone tunes in to see what's going on, because I know from things I hear, we got a lot going on. The way my old boss would say is we have a lot of irons in the fire. So I'm really excited to see how what happens with these with this announcement.
Yeah, we're gonna have fireworks of our own.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Mike, are we seeing any questions coming in that we want to address?
I don't see any new questions. Looks like we're okay. Looks like folks got that figured out with the polls, so it looks like we're good there. I see there's a lot of people responding to the last question or the last poll there, so great to see that. 40% are saying threatened hell is the biggest security challenge. That's good to know.
Yeah. Well, for Logarithm users, we have that service, Threat Intelligence Service, which is really just a tool to bring in feeds of threat intel. But one of the things I really like about it is how we include a lot of open source feeds out of the box with that. And I'll admit, when we do a Logarithm deployment, that's not always the first thing that people will deploy, is the Threat Intelligence Service. But I think that's a really smart one to add in, because getting those IP addresses, those domains of risky domains, things like that, can be huge benefit to that security awareness.
And as another Logarithm plug here, that threat intel package that we offer, it's included with Logarithm when you purchase it. But just a couple notable things there is you can bring in your CrowdStrikes, bring in your recorded future if you're using Anomaly or something like that. Bring in those feeds as well, sticks and taxi feeds, excuse me, that we currently use. Anything that's third party to you. So it's a good call out. I know that a lot of people are saying threat intel's a challenge for them, so just want to make sure we kind of point out on that.
Yeah, that's a really good call out. It looks like some people didn't receive any of the polls. Apologize if that didn't work out, but if you are looking to get more information, feel free to reach out on our website, and we can get in touch with you through there. This has been a fun session, Mike. I always enjoy these. Being in charge of a webinar like this and being having to talk about what's in the news, it's tricky because there's always something going on. Granted, it's not always critical red flag major security incident, but there's always things that are occurring, regardless if it's ransomware to make you do good things, or vulnerabilities and security patches, or software updates. We always have to be watching this and be vigilant. Sorry, it's early here. Vigilant in being aware of it and protecting organizations against it. So I hope everybody that joined us today had a good experience. I know Mike and I, we love doing this. We love that we have some fun times getting ready for this, being a little goofy. But at the end of the day, our entire focus at Logarithm is security. And we're so lucky to have that opportunity to be, zero focused in on this. And so I hope that you guys are able to get some benefits out of this. But Mike, why don't we go and wrap things up and mention, I do want to mention that if you guys are interested in a part 4, we are currently in contract negotiations with our marketing team. So leave a review or feedback on this session to give us some direction if this is something you'd like more of, or if you'd like us to change our focus. Because we're here to make sure that this is a beneficial experience for you guys. Mike, what else do you have for us, though?
Yeah, we definitely want to hear your feedback. You can leave me a personal Yelp review if you want. I'm totally accepted. Venmo if you got it. Just kidding. But we love doing these, guys. All jokes aside, these are fun. We love putting these together, like Jake mentioned. Always something to talk about in the news. Cybersecurity is an ever-evolving industry and community. Feel free to share your feedback about Logarithm, or any questions you might have about technology we offer, or just simply stop by and say hi. And we're hoping to see some of you at Rhythm World this year.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Sierra, I think it's time for you to take us out. Do we have intro and outro music yet, or is that part of the contract negotiations?
Still in negotiations. We'll work on that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, guys. We'll close it up.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Stay safe.